"You ruined the aesthetic," she said, and I swear she used the same tone she'd use for a coffee stain on her white sofa.
Hi everyone, it's Grace. So glad to see you. How are you all doing? Let me know in the comments. But seriously, we need to dive into this story because what this daughter-in-law did to Irene is just pure madness.
I was standing in their living room, looking at the new family portrait above the fireplace. Big, glossy, professionally lit. Keith in his navy sweater, Paige in cream cashmere. Little Hannah in the middle, holding a single sunflower like something out of a catalog. Behind them, a ceramic vase with dried eucalyptus branches, positioned exactly where I had stood 3 months ago. I remembered that photo session. October. Paige had sent me a Pinterest board of approved colors 2 weeks in advance. Sage green, dusty rose, oatmeal, nothing with patterns, nothing too dark. I'd gone to 3 different stores looking for something that would pass her inspection. The sales girl at Macy's had been so patient with me, pulling cardigan after cardigan off the racks while I held up my phone to compare them to Paige's precious mood board. I'd finally settled on one the color of burgundy wine, thought it was elegant enough. Classic. Timeless. Drove 40 minutes to the studio with the white backdrops and the young photographer who called everyone gorgeous and perfect, even when they weren't. And now here I was, 71 years old, staring at the exact spot where I had been standing that day, erased and replaced by a $10 pot from Home Goods. Paige walked up behind me, wine glass in hand, her socked feet silent on the hardwood floor. She followed my gaze to the portrait and tilted her head, studying it like she was admiring her own work at a gallery opening. "The burgundy threw off the whole composition," she explained, swirling her Chardonnay. "Marcus, that's the photographer, he said warm tones in the foreground compete with the focal point, so he edited you out digitally. He's really talented. You can't even tell there was someone there, right?" I said nothing. My throat had closed up like someone had poured cement down it. "Don't take it personally, Irene. She always used my first name. Never Mom. Never even Mrs. Hadley. Just Irene, like I was the cleaning lady or a distant cousin she tolerated at holidays. We'll do another shoot at Christmas. Wear the sage next time. I'll send you a link." Keith came in from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel that probably cost more than my winter coat. He glanced at the portrait, then at me, then at his wife. I could see him doing the math in his head. How much trouble was this going to cause, and was it worth getting involved? "Dinner's almost ready," he announced. "Hannah, go wash your hands." And that was that. I didn't stay for dinner. Told them my stomach was bothering me, which wasn't entirely a lie. Something was definitely twisting inside me, though I don't think it was anything a pill could fix. Keith walked me to my car. The October sun was going down behind their 2-story colonial with the wraparound porch and the 3-car garage and the professionally landscaped yard. I'd helped them buy this house, $40,000 from my retirement savings, 4 years ago. "Just a loan until we get on our feet," Paige had said, sitting at my kitchen table with a folder full of house listings and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Keith had nodded along like a puppet whose strings she held. We all knew I'd never see that money again. I'd accepted it the moment I signed the check. "Mom." Keith put his hand on my shoulder as I fumbled for my keys. "Don't make this into a thing, okay? Paige spent months planning that gallery wall. She's got a vision for the whole house." "A vision," I repeated. The word tasted strange in my mouth, like something that had gone off in the fridge. "You know how she is. Everything has to be just right. It's not personal." I looked at my son, 44 years old. The same boy who used to bring me dandelions in sweaty fists, who cried for 2 days when our cat Mittens died and made me promise we'd see her again in heaven. Now he stood in his driveway in his $200 sneakers, explaining to me why it was reasonable that his wife had cut me out of my own family, like a mole she didn't like the look of. "Keith," I said quietly, "I was in that photograph." "I know, Mom, but I wore what she asked." I smiled when the man told me to smile. I stood where they put me. I drove 40 minutes each way. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, the way he used to do as a teenager when I caught him in a lie about where he'd been Friday night. "Look, it's just a picture. We'll take another one." "Will I be in that one?" He didn't answer. Just kissed my forehead, a quick, distracted peck, the kind you give a child when you want them to stop asking questions, and walked back inside before I could say anything else. I sat in my car for a long time before turning the engine on. The windows of their house glowed warm and golden, all that expensive lighting Paige had insisted on during the renovation I'd also helped pay for. Through the kitchen window, I could see them sitting down to eat. Hannah was laughing at something, her little shoulders shaking. Paige was pouring herself more wine. Keith had his phone out, probably scrolling through something, half present as usual, the way he'd been for years now. The drive home took 40 minutes, and I don't remember a single mile of it. I drove on autopilot, my hands knowing the route better than my brain, while the image of that eucalyptus vase burned behind my eyes. They'd put a plant where I used to be, not even a living plant, dried sticks in a ceramic pot. My house is small. A 3-bedroom ranch I've lived in for 38 years, since Keith was 6, and my husband Bill was still alive, and everything felt like it had a purpose. The paint's peeling a little on the south side, where the sun hits hardest. The gutters need cleaning. The back porch step has been creaking for 3 years now, and I keep meaning to call someone about it. But then I think about the cost and decide it can wait another month. Bill died 8 years ago. Heart attack, quick and merciless, in the parking lot of the hardware store where he'd gone to buy a new faucet for the bathroom sink. He'd been meaning to fix that drip for weeks. Never did. The faucet still drips sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet. I used to hate that sound. Now I think of it as his way of saying hello. He left me the house, a modest pension from his 32 years at the post office, and enough savings that I thought I'd be comfortable. Not rich. Never rich. But comfortable, the way you want to be when you've worked hard all your life and finally get to sit down. I was comfortable, until I started giving it away. That night, after the photograph, I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, just the glow of the street lamp coming through the window. On the table in front of me was a cup of tea I'd forgotten to drink. It had gone cold, a film forming on the surface, and I watched the light catch on it like a tiny oil slick. I kept thinking about that portrait, about the dried eucalyptus branches in a smooth white vase, positioned exactly where my body had been. About the hours I'd spent shopping for that cardigan, the 40-minute drive, the photographer telling me to tilt my chin down a little. Gorgeous, perfect, now hold it. Hold it. That's what I'd been doing my whole life, wasn't it? Holding it, keeping still, staying in the frame until someone decided I didn't belong there anymore. I got up slowly. My knees aren't what they used to be, haven't been since I turned 65, and went to the hallway closet, the one where I keep the photo albums. Real albums, with paper pages and plastic sleeves, the kind nobody makes anymore. My knees complained as I knelt down to pull out the old cardboard box from the bottom shelf. Inside were decades of pictures. Real ones, printed on paper, the kind you can hold in your hands and feel the weight of. Keith at 6 months, naked on a towel on this very living room floor, grinning toothless at the camera. Bill had taken that picture. You could see his shadow at the edge of the frame. Keith at 5, proudly holding up a finger painting that looked like a crime scene, but I'd told him it was the most beautiful tree I'd ever seen. Keith at 8, missing 2 front teeth, holding the trophy from his first Little League game. Keith at 12, awkward and gangly, standing next to me at the county fair. Keith at 18, graduation cap, tilted at what he thought was a rakish angle, me and Bill on either side of him, all of us squinting into the June sun. I remembered that day. How proud we'd been. How certain we were that everything would work out for him, that he'd go to college and find a good job and marry a nice girl and give us grandchildren we'd spoil rotten every weekend. 2 out of 4, I suppose. Though nice might be stretching it. His wedding, 6 years ago. I flipped to those pictures slowly, carefully, the way you handle something you know might hurt you. There I was, in a lavender dress I'd saved 3 months to buy. Standing just slightly to the left of the main group, Paige had arranged the poses herself. She'd been very specific about who stood where, how they angled their bodies, which way they faced. She'd spent more time choreographing the photographs than she had on her vows. In most of the shots, I was partially blocked by an uncle or pushed to the edge of the frame. In one of them, the official portrait, the one they'd sent out with their thank you notes, I was barely visible behind Paige's college roommate, my face a pale blur next to an explosion of chiffon. I'd noticed it at the time, sitting in my living room after the wedding, flipping through the proofs they'd sent. I'd thought it was strange, but I told myself not to be paranoid. She was the bride. She was nervous. She had a lot on her mind. She'd lost her own mother to cancer 2 years before, and I knew that had to be weighing on her, the absence at the altar, the empty seat at the rehearsal dinner. I'd even felt sorry for her, tried to be understanding. Funny how we make excuses for people when we're desperate to keep loving them. Paige came into our lives like weather you can't argue with. Keith met her at some networking event downtown. She was in marketing, he was in sales, and I suppose that's a kind of poetry if you squint hard enough. He called me that night, voice higher than I'd heard it in years. Mom, I met someone special. I wanted to believe him. I wanted it so badly. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Keith proposed at some fancy restaurant with white tablecloths and waiters who called you sir. And she said yes before he'd even finished the question. He showed me the video later. He'd had a friend film it on a phone, hiding behind a potted plant. In the video, Paige was already reaching for the ring before Keith was off his knee. Within a year, they were married. Within 2, Hannah arrived, and for a little while I thought maybe everything would soften. Babies do that sometimes. They sand down the sharp edges. But Paige didn't sand. If anything, she got sharper. I wanted to like her. I tried so hard to like her. I read the same books she talked about, even though they bored me silly. All those business memoirs with titles like Lean In and The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Whatever. I learned which wines she preferred, which restaurants she deemed acceptable, which topics of conversation would make her eyes glaze over. I tried to be the mother-in-law she wanted, whoever that was. But from the very first dinner she came to at my house, there was something off. She didn't eat what I cooked. Dietary restrictions, she said, pushing my pot roast around her plate like it was a dead animal she'd found on the road. This was a recipe my mother had taught me. The same pot roast I'd made for Bill every Sunday for 30 years. The same one Keith used to beg for when he was home from college. Paige took 2 bites and then pushed it to the side. She'd brought her own food in Tupperware. Some kind of grain bowl with seeds and shredded vegetables and something that looked like lawn clippings. She ate it with a fork from her own bag, a special fork, bamboo, because she was trying to reduce her environmental impact. I told myself it was health conscious. I told myself young people were different now, that they thought about things my generation hadn't bothered with. I told myself not to take it personally. There's that phrase again. But then there were the other things. Small things. The kind you're not sure you're allowed to complain about because they seem so petty when you say them out loud. The kind that build up like sediment, layer by layer, until one day you realize you're buried. She rearranged my kitchen when she visited. Moved the coffee mugs to a different shelf because the flow was off. Reorganized my spice rack into alphabetical order. Basil, cayenne, cinnamon, cumin, which would have been fine if I hadn't spent 40 years finding things by feel and memory. I knew where the paprika was because it was always in the same spot, 3 jars from the left, next to the oregano. After she left, it took me 20 minutes to find it, hidden away between nutmeg and pepper like it had something to be ashamed of. When I mentioned it to Keith, gently, I thought, not accusatory, he sighed and said, Paige just likes things a certain way, and that I should see it as her trying to help. Help. Right. She bought me guest slippers to wear in their house, white, disposable, wrapped in plastic like something from a hospital. The kind they give you before a medical procedure. The kind that marks you as temporary, as passing through. I wore them because what else was I going to do? But every time I slipped them on, I felt something shrink inside me. One Sunday, I forgot something in the kitchen and went back to get it. Through the doorway, I watched her pick up the slippers I'd just taken off, hold them at arm's length like they were contaminated, and drop them into the trash. Just toss them away, didn't even try to hide it. Then she squirted hand sanitizer from the little bottle she kept on the counter and rubbed her palms together briskly, like she was trying to scrub away any trace of me. When I mentioned it to Keith later, he said Paige was particular about hygiene and that I shouldn't take it personally. Don't take it personally. I was starting to understand that phrase for what it really was, a way to make me doubt my own perceptions. But I kept showing up. Every Sunday dinner, every birthday, every holiday. I brought gifts Paige never acknowledged. They'd disappear into closets, never seen again, and food she never ate. I babysat Hannah whenever they needed me, which was often, and pretended not to hear Paige whispering to Keith in the next room that I spoiled her too much with cookies and stories and letting her stay up past bedtime. Spoiled her, as if love was something you could have too much of, as if a grandmother's affection was a threat to be managed. And I wrote checks. That was the big one. The elephant in every room, the unspoken ledger that kept getting longer. The $40,000 for the down payment. We'll pay you back, Irene. We just need to get into the house first. The market's so competitive right now. Then $5,000 for the emergency car repair when Paige totaled her Audi and insisted the replacement had to be the same brand. Then $2,000 a month for Hannah's private school because the public schools in their district weren't up to standard. I didn't have $2,000 a month to spare, not really. My pension covered my bills, the utilities, the groceries, but there wasn't much left over. But I moved things around. Cut back on groceries. I could eat soup for dinner. Soup was fine. Stopped going to the hairdresser. I could trim my own ends. Nobody was looking at me anyway. Canceled the subscription to the gardening magazine I'd read for 20 years. Told myself it was for my granddaughter, so it was worth it. And through all of it, I was disappearing. Inch by inch, photograph by photograph, like someone slowly turning down the volume on a radio until there's nothing but static. Until one day, I looked up and found myself replaced by a vase. The Sunday after the portrait incident, I didn't go to their house. I called Keith in the morning, said I had a cold, Said I was feeling achy and didn't want to give anything to Hannah. Feel better, he said, and hung up before I could say anything else. The whole call lasted maybe 40 seconds. I sat there with the phone in my hand, listening to the dial tone, wondering when conversations with my son had become so transactional. The Sunday after that, I said I had plans with a friend. Marion, I told him, we're going to a movie. He didn't ask which movie. Didn't ask how Marion was doing. Just said, have fun. And that was that. I didn't have any plans. I sat in my living room and watched a documentary about penguins, then another one about deep-sea creatures, then a cooking show where people yelled at each other about risotto. The house felt very quiet, very large, very empty. The third Sunday, I just didn't call at all. Keith texted me on Monday. Everything okay? Paige noticed you haven't been around. Paige noticed, not Keith. Paige. I wrote back, just tired. Talk soon. 3 little words. I hit send before I could think too hard about them. A week later, I got a text from Paige herself. This was unusual. She never texted me, always went through Keith, as if direct communication with her mother-in-law was beneath her station. But there it was, her name on my screen, with a photo attached. The photo was Hannah eating an ice cream cone, chocolate smeared on her chin. The caption read, "Someone misses her Grammy. When are you coming to visit?" I stared at that message for a long time. The emoji stared back at me, its cartoon eyes wide and pleading. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost elegant. She wasn't asking how I was. She wasn't apologizing for the photograph. She wasn't acknowledging that anything had happened at all. She was using my granddaughter as a lever, the same way she'd used her for years. Come visit. Pay for things. Stay in your corner. Don't make waves. I didn't respond. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Hannah's number. The little flip phone they'd given her for emergencies. She was 9, old enough for a phone but too young for a smartphone. That's what Paige had decided. The screen glowed in my hand. I answered immediately. Hello? Hannah? Grammy? Her voice was small and tight, the way it got when she was trying not to cry and failing. Grammy, are you there? I'm here, sweetheart. What's wrong? Are you okay? I'm okay. She sniffled. But Grammy, Mommy says you don't love us anymore. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually sat down, hard, on the arm of the couch. What? She says you're mad at us. Hannah was crying now. I could hear it. Those little hiccuping sobs that used to break my heart when she was a toddler and still broke it now. She says that's why you don't come over anymore. You're mad and you don't want to see us. My chest felt like someone had reached inside and squeezed. Oh, honey. No, that's not true. I'm not mad at you. I could never be mad at you. Then why won't you visit? I made you a picture. It's a cat? It's purple because purple is your favorite color. It's not very good, but I tried really hard. I'm sure it's beautiful. Grammy, please come over, please? I miss you. I miss baking cookies with you. I miss when you read me stories. I closed my eyes. Paige knew exactly what she was doing. She'd wound this child up and pointed her at me like a weapon. A 9-year-old girl crying into a flip phone, weaponized guilt in the voice of innocence. And the worst part? It was working. I'll come see you soon, I heard myself say. I promise. Can you do something for me, sweetheart? Can you put that picture somewhere safe and give it to me yourself when I see you? Okay. She sniffled. Okay, Grammy, I'll keep it in my special box. Good girl. Grammy? Yes, baby. I love you. The words were simple. A child's declaration, uncomplicated by subtext or ulterior motive. Just love, pure and offered freely, the way it should be. I love you too, I said, more than all the stars. After she hung up, I sat very still for a long time. The house was quiet around me, the kind of quiet that feels like it's waiting for something. The afternoon light was fading, turning everything gold and then gray. Then I got my car keys. I didn't call ahead, didn't text. Just drove the 40 minutes and pulled into their driveway like it was any other Sunday. It was a Thursday afternoon, overcast and chilly. The kind of day that makes you want to stay inside with a blanket and a book. Keith's car was there, parked next to Paige's white SUV. Strange, since he should have been at work. I wondered if he was sick or if there was some kind of crisis I didn't know about. For a moment, I felt a flicker of concern, the old maternal instinct that never quite goes away, no matter how old your child gets or how much he disappoints you. I walked up the path to their front door, past the decorative planters and the welcome mat that said, "Blessed," in curling script. But something made me stop before I reached the porch. The kitchen window was cracked open, the way Paige always left it when she was cooking. She claimed it was for ventilation, that the hood fan wasn't strong enough for her ambitious recipes. But I suspected she just liked the idea of neighbors smelling her meals and being impressed. I could hear voices, Keith's low rumble, Paige's sharper tone, drifting out with the warm air. Have to talk to her soon. That was Paige. Before she changes her mind or some lawyer gets in her ear. I stopped walking, stood very still. I know. Keith, sounding tired. It's just awkward. Awkward? Keith, that house is worth $300,000, easy. Maybe more, with the lot size. Real estate in that neighborhood is going through the roof. If she signs it over now, we avoid probate, we avoid estate taxes, we avoid any complications down the road. What complications? I don't know. What if she gets sick and needs nursing home care? They'll take everything. The government comes in and takes the house to pay for it. I've read about this. But if she transfers the deed to us now, there's a 5-year look-back period, and then it's protected. We wait too long and we lose everything she's built. I heard the clink of a glass being set down. My heart was pounding so loud, I was sure they could hear it through the wall. She's slowing down, Paige continued. Have you noticed? She repeats herself sometimes. She forgot Hannah's birthday was in March last year. Hannah's birthday is in April. Whatever. The point is she's not getting sharper. We need to do this while she can still sign documents without someone claiming she wasn't competent. Get the house. Get whatever savings she has left set up properly. It's not about taking advantage. It's about planning ahead, being responsible. Keith was quiet for a moment. I could imagine him sitting at the island, that expensive marble they'd installed last year, turning his coffee cup in his hands the way he did when he was thinking. Then, how do I even bring it up? Just tell her you're worried about her. Tell her you want to protect her legacy. Old people love that word. Legacy. Tell her it's what Dad would have wanted. He'd want his grandchildren taken care of, wouldn't he? Don't bring Bill into this, I thought. Don't you dare. I don't know, Paige. She's going to think we're after her money. We're not after her money. We're protecting the family's assets. There's a difference. Is there? Keith, don't be naive. She's 71. She lives alone. She could fall and break a hip tomorrow, and then what? Some nursing home takes everything your parents worked for. Everything she saved. At least this way it stays with us. With Hannah. Isn't that what family is supposed to be about? I stepped back from the window slowly, carefully, like I was trying not to wake something sleeping. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. I walked back to my car as quietly as I could, got in, and sat there for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, not moving. Through the kitchen window, I could see their silhouettes moving around, making dinner, planning my future, dividing up the assets of a woman they thought was too old and too slow to notice. I pulled out of the driveway before either of them knew I'd been there. The drive home was a blur. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white and stayed that way. My jaw was clenched so hard my teeth hurt. I barely registered the traffic lights, the other cars, the familiar landmarks I'd passed thousands of times. All I could hear was Paige's voice. Old people love that word. Legacy. I parked in my driveway, turned off the engine, and sat in the silence of my own car, in front of my own house, feeling like a stranger in my own life. They were planning to take my house, my husband's house. The house where I'd raised my son, planted tomatoes every spring, learned to be a widow at 63. They were sitting in their kitchen drinking wine and strategizing about how to sweet-talk me out of everything I had left. And Keith, my baby, the boy who used to fit in my lap, hadn't said no. Hadn't said, "That's my mother you're talking about." Hadn't said, "We can't do that to her." He'd just asked how to bring it up. I didn't sleep that night. Not even close. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows from the streetlight play across the plaster, listening to the old house settle around me. Every creak, every groan, sounds I'd known for decades, sounds that used to be comforting, felt different now. Like the house was asking me if I was going to let them take it. Around 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep entirely and went downstairs. Made tea I didn't drink. Sat in Bill's old armchair, the one with the worn spot on the armrest where he used to tap his fingers when he watched football. The fabric was faded now, the cushion a little flat, but I couldn't bring myself to replace it. Too much of him was still in that chair. "You would have told me to stop this years ago," I said out loud. I'd started talking to him after he died, not prayers exactly, just conversations. Sometimes I'd tell him about my day. Sometimes I'd ask his advice. Some nights he felt close enough to answer. But tonight, the house was quiet. "You saw her for what she was, didn't you?" I continued. "That first dinner, when she wouldn't eat my pot roast. You gave me a look across the table. I pretended not to notice. But you knew." The silence didn't argue with me. At 6, when the sun started coming through the windows, I picked up the phone and called Marion. We'd worked together for 20 years at Jefferson Elementary, both of us school nurses, patching up scraped knees and checking for lice and calling parents when a kid threw up on the playground. We'd retired within a year of each other, kept in touch, met for coffee every few weeks. She was the only person I trusted enough to tell this to. "Irene?" Her voice was groggy, rough with sleep. "It's 6 a.m. "I know, I'm sorry. I need to talk to someone before I lose my nerve." "What happened?" I told her everything. The photo, the slippers, the money, the conversation I'd overheard through the kitchen window. By the end, I was crying. Those quiet tears that sneak out when you're too tired to hold them back. The kind you can't stop once they start. Marion was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Honey, you've been pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom and wondering why you're always thirsty. I just wanted them to love me. I know, but love that has to be bought isn't love. It's a transaction, and you've been on the losing end for 6 years. What do? First, you stop paying for things. Today, cancel whatever automatic payments you have set up. Second, you call a lawyer and make sure your house is protected. Third, and this is the hard one, you stop expecting your son to choose you. He's already made his choice. You need to make yours. But Hannah will survive. Kids are stronger than we give them credit for, and she needs to see what it looks like when a woman stands up for herself. That's a better lesson than all the cookies and bedtime stories in the world. We talked for another hour. By the time I hung up, the sun was fully up, and I had a list of things to do written on the back of an envelope. My handwriting was shaky, but the words were clear. The first thing I did was go upstairs to my bedroom. On the wall above my dresser was a framed photograph from Keith's wedding, him and Paige at the altar, looking at each other like the world began and ended with their faces. I'd put it there 6 years ago because I thought it was what a loving mother was supposed to do. Welcome the daughter-in-law. Celebrate the marriage. Make space for the new family, even if it meant shrinking yourself to fit. I took it down. The nail left a small hole in the wall, a tiny dark eye staring at me. I put the photograph in the closet, behind the winter blankets where I wouldn't have to see it. In its place, I hung a photo of me and Bill from our 25th anniversary. The one where we're standing on the beach in Oregon, both of us sunburned and laughing at something I can't remember anymore. I think a seagull had stolen Bill's sandwich. Or maybe it was starting to rain. The memory was fuzzy, but the feeling was clear. We were happy. We were together. We didn't need anyone's approval. Then I went downstairs, opened my laptop, and canceled the automatic transfer for Hannah's tuition. Then I called a lawyer. The attorney's name was Deborah Wilcox. She had an office downtown in one of those converted Victorian houses with creaky stairs and high ceilings and windows that rattled when trucks went by. Her desk was piled with papers, and there was a dying plant on the windowsill that looked like it had been dying for years. I liked her immediately because she didn't try to make small talk or offer me tea or treat me like a fragile old woman who needed handling. She just asked me what was going on and listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly, tapping a pen against her notepad. "You're not the first mother to sit in that chair with this story," she said. "You won't be the last." Adult children and their spouses deciding that elderly parents are just obstacles between them and real estate. I see it every month. Is it legal, what they want to do? They're not trying to do anything illegal. They want you to voluntarily sign over your assets. That's perfectly legal, if stupid. Stupid? For you, not for them. They get a house and whatever savings you have left. You get, what? A promise to take care of you? A bedroom in their guest wing? They didn't mention a bedroom. They never do. She set down the pen. Here's the good news. Your house is in your name only. Your husband's will was clear on that, and you've never added anyone else to the deed. Nobody can take it from you without your signature. Not Keith, not Paige, not the Pope himself.
Boom! Did you hear that? The house is hers and hers alone. Quick check-in. Where are you all watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. But honestly, I need your opinion. If you were Irene, would you keep the house and kick them out after they photoshopped you out of their life? Or is blood thicker than water? Let me know, because what she does next is the definition of standing your ground.
And the money I've already given them? Gone. She said it simply, without softening. That was a gift, not a loan, unless you have something in writing. I didn't. Of course I didn't. You don't ask your own child to sign a promissory note when he says he needs help. Here's what I recommend, Deborah continued. Update your will. Make sure your assets go where you want them to go. If that's still to your son, fine. If it's to charity, fine. If you want to leave it all to a cat shelter, that's your prerogative. But make it explicit. Document your wishes while you're clearly competent, so nobody can challenge them later. And Hannah? My granddaughter. There are ways to provide for her directly. A trust, for example. Money or property that goes specifically to her, that her parents can't touch. She'd receive it at a certain age, 18, 21, 25, whatever you decide. I thought about Hannah, her little voice on the phone, her purple cat drawing, the way she said, "more than all the stars," like it was our secret language. Can I do that? Give to her but not to them? Absolutely. We do it all the time. I signed papers that day, started the process of protecting what was mine, what Bill and I had built with decades of work and sacrifice and choosing the store brand cereal so we could put a little more in savings. Walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in years, like I'd set down a bag I hadn't realized I was carrying. But I knew the hard part was still coming. The call came 2 weeks later. Keith's name on my screen, a Friday evening. I was sitting in the kitchen, eating soup from a can, because I hadn't felt like cooking. "Mom, what the hell is going on with Hannah's school?" I didn't put down my spoon. "What do you mean?" "They sent us a bill. They said the tuition payment didn't go through. Something about the automatic transfer being canceled." "That's right." Silence. Then, "What do you mean, that's right?" "I canceled the automatic transfer. You'll need to make other arrangements." "Other arrangements?" His voice was rising. "Mom, that's $2,000 a month." "I know. I've been paying it for 3 years." "Because you wanted to. You said you wanted to help with her education. You said it was important to you." I took another bite of soup. Tomato. It needed more salt. "And now I'm done helping. You and Paige will have to figure it out." Keith made a sound like a tea kettle about to boil over. "Is this about the photo?" "Are you seriously doing this because of a stupid photo?" "It's not about the photo." "Then what? What is this about? Because it seems like you're punishing Hannah for something she didn't even do." "I'm not punishing Hannah. I'm making a choice about how I spend my money." "Your money. Right. The money you've been throwing at us for years, and now suddenly you're cutting us off because, what? Paige hurt your feelings?" I set down my spoon. "When was the last time you called me just to see how I was? Not about money, not about Hannah, not about needing something, just to talk to your mother." The line went quiet. "Keith? I call you. You text. You send pictures of Hannah with captions that Paige writes. You leave voicemails asking me to babysit or telling me about schedule changes. But when was the last time you asked me how I was feeling? What I was doing? Whether I was lonely or scared or happy?" He didn't answer. "I heard you," I said quietly. 2 weeks ago. I came to visit Hannah because she called me crying, and the kitchen window was open. More silence. Then carefully, "What did you hear?" "Enough. About my house, about my savings, about how I'm not getting sharper, about how you need to move fast before I change my mind or some lawyer gets in my ear, about how old people love the word legacy." "Mom?" I'm not finished. My voice was steady, which surprised me. I'd expected to be shaking, to be crying, to be falling apart. But something had changed in the week since I'd overheard that conversation. Something had hardened into clarity. "I've given you and Paige almost $70,000 over the past 6 years. 40 for the down payment, 5 for the car, 24 for the school, plus the little things, the birthday checks, The Christmas presents. The just because money when Paige decided Hannah needed dance lessons or art camp. We appreciated that. Did you? Because appreciation usually comes with a thank you, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've heard those words from your wife. Paige isn't. I've watched her throw away slippers after I wore them. I've watched her reorganize my kitchen like I'm a guest in my own family. I've listened to her correct my grammar, dismiss my opinions, and tell Hannah that Grammy's stories are a bit long. I've let myself be edited out of photographs. I paused. And through all of it, I told myself it was worth it because you were my son, and Hannah was my granddaughter, and family is supposed to be worth the trouble. I heard him breathing on the other end, waiting. But I'm done pretending that what you're offering me is love, because it isn't. It's a transaction, and I'm not going to fund it anymore. Keith's voice, when he finally spoke, was cold in a way I'd never heard from him before, like a door closing. Paige said this would happen. She said you'd turn on us eventually, that you couldn't handle not being the center of attention. Paige said a lot of things, apparently. You know what, Mom? Maybe she's right. Maybe you are too difficult. Maybe you're too needy, always expecting us to drop everything and make you feel important when we have our own lives to live. There it was, the knife I'd been waiting for without knowing it. Goodbye, Keith, I said. Mom, wait. I hung up. The hardest night came about a week later. I was sitting in the living room, not watching the television that was playing some reality show I didn't recognize. People were yelling at each other about something, a cake, maybe, or a wedding. The volume was low, just background noise to fill the silence. It was past 10, and the house felt very large, very dark, very empty. The kind of empty that presses in on you from all sides. I started to wonder if I was the crazy one. Maybe I was too difficult. Maybe I did expect too much. Maybe Paige was right, and I was just a bitter old woman who couldn't accept that her son had grown up and didn't need her anymore. Maybe all those years of helping had really been manipulation in disguise. Buying their love, demanding their attention, making everything about me. I thought about calling Keith, apologizing, writing another check. Going back to Sunday dinners and disposable slippers and standing at the edge of photographs. It would be easier. That's the thing nobody tells you about standing up for yourself. It's exhausting. Being a doormat is comfortable. You know where you stand. You know what's expected. You can lie down and let people walk over you and tell yourself it's love. And sometimes it almost feels that way. I almost did it. I had my phone in my hand, Keith's number on the screen. My thumb was hovering over the call button. Then I saw the card. It was on the side table, half hidden under a magazine. Hannah must have mailed it herself. The envelope had too many stamps on it, like she wasn't sure how many she needed. Her handwriting on the front, big and careful. Grammy. I'd forgotten I'd put it there. I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a drawing of a cat, purple and lopsided, with whiskers that went in different directions. Underneath, in wobbly letters, I love you, Grammy. And at the bottom, in smaller writing, like she'd run out of space and had to squeeze, you smell like cookies and feel like hugs. I held that card for a long time. My hands didn't shake. They were steady, for the first time in weeks. I put the phone down. A month went by. December crept in, cold and gray and early dark. I decorated my house for Christmas the way I always did. The little artificial tree, the lights in the front window, the wreath on the door that Bill had bought at a craft fair 20 years ago. The wreath was getting a bit ragged, some of the fake berries falling off, but I couldn't bring myself to replace it. Marion came over to help with the lights, and we drank too much eggnog and watched White Christmas on the old DVD player and didn't talk about Keith. She told me about her daughter's new job and her grandson's first steps, and I listened and nodded and tried to feel happy for her. But I thought about Keith. Every day. Every time I walked past the closet where I'd put his wedding photo. Every time I saw a commercial for some family holiday movie. Every time the mail came and there was nothing from him. No card, no letter, nothing. I thought about all the Christmases when he was small, when he'd wake me up at 5 a.m. to see if Santa had come. The year he got his first bicycle and rode it in circles around the living room until I made him stop. The year Bill dressed up as Santa and the beard fell off halfway through and Keith cried and then laughed and then cried again because he was so confused. I thought about the man he'd become and the man I'd hoped he would be and how far apart those two people were. I'd stopped expecting him to call, which is maybe why, when my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon, a gray, drizzly Tuesday 2 weeks before Christmas, I almost didn't answer it. The caller ID said, "Paige." I stared at it for 3 rings. 4, 5. She'd never called me directly, not once in 6 years. Always through Keith or through carefully staged photos with emoji captions. What could she possibly want to say to me now? I picked up. "Irene?" Her voice was strange. Thick and uneven, like she was talking through a mouthful of cotton. "Irene, are you there?" "I'm here. I need to talk to you. Can I come over? Please?" She'd never said please to me before. Not once. The word sounded strange in her mouth, like she was trying out a foreign language. Is Hannah okay? That was the only thing that could matter enough for her to call me like this. Hannah's fine. She's at school. She made a sound I'd never heard from her. Something between a gasp and a sob. The kind of noise you make when you're trying not to fall apart and failing. Everything else is falling apart. I know I have no right to ask. I know what I've done, how I've treated you, but I don't know who else to talk to, and I can't. She was crying. Paige, who never had a hair out of place, who treated emotion like a design flaw, was crying so hard she couldn't finish her sentence. Against every instinct, against every self-protective wall I'd built, I said, "Come over." She arrived 40 minutes later. When I opened the door, I barely recognized her. Paige had always been polished. Perfect makeup, every line sharp and deliberate. Hair blown out and smoothed into submission. Clothes that looked like they belonged in a magazine. All clean lines and expensive fabrics. Even at Sunday dinners, when normal people might relax, she looked like she was ready for a photo shoot. But the woman standing on my porch looked like she'd slept in her sweater. Her eyes were red and swollen, her nose rubbed raw. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot that showed gray roots I'd never seen before. She wasn't wearing makeup. She wasn't wearing jewelry. She looked, for the first time in the 6 years I'd known her, like a real person instead of a display model. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. "Thank you for letting me come." I stepped aside and let her in. She stood in my living room like she didn't know what to do with her body. I'd never seen her in this house before. She'd always insisted on hosting, on controlling the environment, on having everything on her terms. Now she was in my space, surrounded by my furniture and my photos and my 38 years of memories, and she looked completely lost. "Sit down," I said. "I'll make tea." By the time I came back with 2 cups, proper cups, not the guest mug she would have given me. She'd started crying again. Not the pretty, delicate tears I might have expected from her, but the ugly kind. The real kind. The kind that makes your face swell and your nose run and your breath come in ragged gasps. I sat down across from her and waited. "Keith lost his job," she finally said, when she could speak. "3 weeks ago. They eliminated his whole department. He found out on a Monday and didn't tell me until Thursday." I sipped my tea, said nothing. "He didn't tell me at first because he didn't know how. Because every time something went wrong, I blamed him. I picked apart everything he did. I made him feel like a failure before he'd even failed." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, a gesture so human, so un-Paige-like, that it startled me. So he kept pretending to go to work. He'd get dressed in the morning, drive to a coffee shop, sit there for 8 hours, and come home like nothing was wrong. "How did you find out?" "His boss called the house, wanted to know where to send his last paycheck." She laughed bitterly. He'd been lying to me for weeks, and when I confronted him, I did exactly what he was afraid of. I screamed. I cried. I said horrible things. I told him he'd ruined everything. "And your savings?" Her face crumpled. "Gone. He put it in some cryptocurrency thing. A friend from work, his former work, told him it was a sure thing, that we'd double our money in 6 months, and then we wouldn't need to worry about anything." She looked at me with those red-rimmed eyes. "It crashed 2 weeks ago. We lost almost everything. $80,000. I thought about the $40,000 I'd given them for the down payment. The money Bill and I had saved for decades. Gone into a house that they might not even be able to keep. The mortgage is 3 months behind," Paige continued. "I've been using credit cards to buy groceries. Hannah's school already called. She can't go back after winter break unless we pay what we owe. And now..." She looked at me, really looked, with something I'd never seen in her face before. Shame. Real shame. "Now we might lose the house." I took a long sip of my tea. It was still too hot, but I needed something to do with my hands. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't know who else to tell." Her voice cracked. "My friends, my real friends, I pushed them all away. Paige doesn't have problems. Paige has everything under control. That's the image I built. That's the lie I've been living." She shook her head. "I don't have anyone. And Keith is barely speaking to me. He sleeps in the guest room. He looks at me like I'm a stranger, like he's finally seeing who I really am." "And who is that?" The question hung in the air. Paige looked down at her untouched tea, at her chapped hands, at the worn carpet beneath her feet. "Someone afraid," she said quietly. "Someone so afraid of not being good enough that she made everyone around her feel like they weren't good enough, including Keith, including Hannah." She looked up at me. "Including you. Especially you." "Why especially me?" "Because you're everything I'm not." She said it simply, like a fact. "You raised Keith alone after his father died. You worked for 40 years as a school nurse, helping children, and you never complained about it. You give and never seem to keep score. You actually know how to be happy with what you have." I thought about that. About the version of me she was describing. It sounded like a saint. It sounded like a martyr. It didn't sound like a woman who had spent the last month questioning everything she'd ever believed about her own family. "I'm not a saint, Paige." "I know. That makes it worse." She wiped her eyes. Saints can be dismissed. Real people can't. I look at you and I see everything I don't know how to be. Everything I was never taught. Everything I never figured out on my own. How to be content. How to love without keeping track. How to feel like you're enough without having everything perfect. She was crying again. And instead of learning from you, I tried to make you smaller, to push you out, to convince myself that I was better because my countertops matched and my photos had the right aesthetic. I cropped you out of that picture because looking at you made me feel like a fraud. And you were, the one person who might have actually helped me. If I'd known you wanted help. I didn't know either. That's the problem. She looked at me with something raw in her face, something unprotected. I'm so sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything. I know you have every right to tell me to leave and never come back, but I needed you to know that I see it now. What I did. What I was. What I've lost. She put her head in her hands. Her shoulders shook. I sat there for a long time, watching her cry, thinking about everything she'd told me and everything she hadn't. About Keith in a coffee shop for 8 hours, pretending to work. About $80,000 evaporating into nothing. About a marriage that had looked so perfect from the outside and was apparently hollow at its core. What do you want from me, Paige? She looked up. Nothing. I mean, I came here hoping you might help. That's the truth. But I don't expect it. I don't deserve it. She took a shaky breath. I just needed to apologize. Face to face. Before everything finishes falling apart. I thought about the $40,000. The $70,000 total. The years of small humiliations that had built up like plaque on a heart. The photograph where I'd been erased and replaced by a vase of dead sticks. But I also thought about Hannah, her lopsided purple cat, her voice on the phone. Are you mad at me, Grammy? And I thought about something my mother used to say, back when I was young and angry and sure that I'd never forgive anyone for anything. Holding a grudge is like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to get sick. I'm not going to give you money, I said finally. Paige nodded. I understand. I've given you enough money. $70,000 over 6 years. More than I could afford. More than I should have. I know. But I might have another idea. The next morning, I called Deborah Wilcox, explained the situation, asked questions, crunched numbers, made arrangements. 3 days later, Keith, Paige, and I sat at Deborah's conference table under the fluorescent lights, with the dying plant watching from the windowsill. Keith looked terrible. Gray skin, dark circles under his eyes, a nervous twitch in his jaw that I'd never seen before. He'd aged a decade in the weeks since we'd last spoken. He was wearing a sweater I remembered buying him for Christmas years ago, the kind of thing a mother notices. He'd barely looked at me when he came in. But when he finally did, something in his face crumpled. Not anger, not defiance, just exhaustion. And maybe, underneath it, something that looked like relief. Mom, he said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know, I said. Sit down. Deborah laid out the paperwork. She'd prepared everything overnight, worked on it until midnight, she told me later. Pro bono, she'd said, because she liked the story, because she wanted to see how it ended. Here was my offer. I would purchase their house at market value, $400,000, according to the appraisal. I would use my savings, the money I'd been planning to leave them in my will anyway. The money Bill and I had worked our whole lives to accumulate. They would pay me rent. Fair market rent, not a family discount, adjusted each year for inflation. That money would go into a trust for Hannah's education. She would receive it when she turned 25, old enough to use it wisely, with no possibility of early withdrawal by her parents. Keith and Paige would keep living in the house. They wouldn't be homeless. Their daughter wouldn't be uprooted. But the house would be mine, not theirs. Not yet. Maybe never. And there were conditions. I want regular visits with Hannah, I said. Every other weekend. Not because you need a babysitter. Because she's my granddaughter and I love her, and I won't be kept away from her anymore. Keith nodded. I want honesty. No more lies about jobs or investments or how you're doing fine. If things are hard, I want to know. I may not be able to help, but I don't want to be the last one to find out that my son's life is falling apart. Another nod. Paige was crying quietly, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. And I want to be in the family photos. I looked directly at Paige. All of them. In whatever I choose to wear. No cropping, no editing, no excuses about warm tones or focal points or aesthetic. Paige met my eyes. She didn't look away. Yes, she said. Yes, of course. Keith started to say something, then stopped. Swallowed. Started again. Mom, we don't deserve this. No, I agreed. You don't. But Hannah does. And despite everything, despite all of it, you're still my son. I'm not doing this to help you, Keith. I'm doing this so I can sleep at night knowing I didn't abandon a 9-year-old girl because her parents made mistakes. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. And because apparently, doing the right thing is something I can't seem to stop. We signed the papers that afternoon. All three of us, witnessed and notarized, everything official. When it was done, Keith stood up and looked at me like he wanted to hug me but wasn't sure if he was allowed. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet, I said. The rent is due on the 1st of every month. Don't be late. That was 6 months ago. It hasn't been easy. Recovery never is. Not for people, not for families, not for anything that's been broken badly enough that you can see the cracks. Keith and I are still finding our way back to each other. Back might not even be the right word. Maybe we're finding our way to something new. Something that doesn't involve me pretending to be okay with being invisible, or him pretending that everything's fine when it's falling apart. He calls me now. Not every day, not even every week, but regularly. Sometimes we don't talk about anything important. Sometimes we just sit on the phone listening to each other breathe. It's awkward. It's uncomfortable. It's real. He got a new job last month. Lower salary, longer commute, but he seems happier. He told me he's seeing a therapist, working through things he didn't know he needed to work through. I didn't ask for details. Some things a son doesn't have to share with his mother. Paige is different. Softer somehow, like something hard inside her finally cracked open and let the light in. She brings me flowers when she visits. Not expensive arrangements from a fancy shop, but little bunches from the farmer's market, wrapped in brown paper, slightly wilted, perfectly imperfect. She asks about my week. She ate my pot roast last Sunday, 2 helpings, and told me it was delicious. Last month, she asked me to teach her how I make my pie crust. The one with the secret ingredient Bill swore was magic. A splash of apple cider vinegar that makes the dough flaky and tender. We stood in my kitchen for 2 hours, flour on our elbows, and she actually listened when I talked. Asked questions, wrote things down in a little notebook she'd brought. I'm not foolish enough to think people change overnight. I know the old page is still in there somewhere, ready to reorganize a spice rack or critique a cardigan at a moment's notice. But I also know that people are capable of growth if they want it badly enough. And I think she wants it. I really do. Hannah comes over every Saturday. We bake cookies, chocolate chip, her favorite, and draw pictures at the kitchen table and watch movies with too much sugar and too little educational value. Last week she told me I was her favorite person in the whole world, except for Mr. Whiskers, her class hamster. I'll take second place to a hamster. It's still better than being cropped out of a photograph. On the wall in their living room, where the eucalyptus vase used to be, there's a new picture, taken at Easter, just a few weeks ago. Keith is on the left. Paige is on the right. Hannah is in the middle, holding a basket of plastic eggs, grinning so wide you can see the gap where she lost her tooth. And I'm there too. In my burgundy cardigan, the one that supposedly ruined the aesthetic. I'm exactly where I belong. I'm 72 years old now. I've buried a husband and raised a son and worked more double shifts than I can count, and given away more money than I probably should have. I've been taken for granted. I've been lied to. I've been edited out of my own family like an inconvenient shadow. But here's what I've learned. Sitting in this body that aches more every morning, in this house that creaks with memories, you don't have to accept being invisible. You don't have to keep quiet when someone treats you like a prop in their performance. You don't have to fund your own erasure. Love, real love, doesn't ask you to disappear. If someone crops you out of the picture, you have every right to ask why. And if the answer is, you ruined the aesthetic, you have every right to walk away from the frame entirely. I almost didn't. God knows I almost didn't. I almost kept swallowing it, kept smiling, kept writing checks, kept standing at the edge of photographs, grateful for whatever sliver of space they allowed me. But then I stopped. And here I am. Still standing. Still taking up space. Still wearing burgundy whenever I feel like it. Warm tones and focal points be damned. If you've ever been made to feel like you're too much trouble, like you're in the way, like your presence is a problem to be solved, like you should be grateful for the scraps of attention they toss your way, let me tell you something. It took me 71 years to learn. You are not a burden. You are not a complication. You are not an aesthetic choice. You are someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone's friend, someone who has spent a lifetime giving and loving and showing up, even when it was hard, even when it wasn't noticed, even when it wasn't thanked. And you have every right to be seen. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for apologies. Don't wait until someone else decides you're worth including. Take your space back. And if this story meant something to you, if you saw yourself in any part of it, then do something for me. Tell someone. Share it. Leave a comment. Let another woman out there know she's not alone in feeling like she's being slowly erased by the people who are supposed to love her. Because we're not alone. And we're done being invisible.
Irene chose her dignity over their perfect aesthetic, and I am here for it. You are a person, not a background prop for someone's social media. Thanks for hanging out with me today. You guys are amazing. If you're Team Irene, hit that like button and subscribe for more. See you in the next one. Stay bold.